Put these back. Okay, thank you. It's a delight to be able to participate in this conversation today. And, okay, good. What I want to do is to offer up for our discussion of ethics and AI today a particular conceptual lens, one that I hope is going to sort of pick up on some of the themes that have already come up. And that lens is the spatial organization of AI. That is, I suggest that it's useful for us to be able to think not only about what AI does, but also about where AI does it. So, for example, most of our phones are not powerful enough to engage in speech and voice recognition by themselves, but they are connected enough to be able to send speech data to back-end servers for analysis and response, and so offer us the illusion of verbal interaction. So this is AI, but it's AI at a distance. And I think that spatial organization matters, the very particular kind of spatial configuration at work. This is maybe a somewhat sort of counterintuitive position, but I want to argue that the particular relevance of a spatial view to ethical arguments is at least twofold. The first is that it sort of directs our attention towards questions of our ability to manage what Nissenbaum calls contextually appropriate information flows, which I think is often a more useful framework and starting point for conversations about privacy than the word privacy gives us. To think instead about the flows of information, and flows naturally requires us to think similarly about the spaces amongst which information might flow. The second relevance of this sort of spatial view is that it links the operations of AI to questions of presence, control, and authority, and so perhaps gives us some sort of a useful framework to think about. So I want to sort of think about this in terms of two particular spatial dimensions. The first is what I'm calling sites of action. That is, the places where things happen, whether those be things that we do, things that systems do on our behalf, or things that systems do with information that we generate, or indeed where systems keep information that we generate. Thinking of this spatially tunes us, again, to questions of boundaries and movements, and therefore also of access. Do we have access to the spaces where our information acts? Do we have access to the places where AI is happening? And if not, then what influence does that have on our ability to be able to predict the consequences of our actions, to participate in choices about those actions, and so forth? Thinking in turn then about moving on from the notion of sites of action, we can also think about the sites of deliberation. That is, the spaces within which we can think about goals, needs, and acceptable actions that we take and that AI may take alongside us. So the challenge here is to create spaces within which the capacities of AI can be made visible and then opened up for assessment and debate. So part of the challenge, in other words, is that much of the deliberation that we engage in about AI, including perhaps the discussions we're having today, aren't necessarily taking place at the places where AI is itself happening, both sort of as a sort of academic exercise and indeed also as a sort of technical practice. And so, so when AI's spaces of action are distinct from us, they are potentially also distinct from the places of deliberation and therefore of value. So in general, then, a focus on sort of sites and spaces allows us to think about AI and ethics in terms of boundaries, presence, mutuality, these sorts of concerns, how we can be together with intelligent systems. And when I say boundaries, I mean that to imply both limits and inclusion. Boundaries are things that keep us apart, but they're also things that sort of link people together. I want to note, too, that this naturally forces us to attend not only to questions of space, but also to questions of time, how boundaries evolve over time. Think, for instance, of the jurisdictional challenges of a British exit from the European Union, or from the ever-changing landscape of corporate partnerships and ownership that mean that information data sets are continually being commingled in new kinds of ways. So the important thing about AI spatialities here is that they're not given, they're designed. There are points, and these are the results of choices we make, and alternatives can also be made. So the AI spatialities are places where we can express our values and control and shape development in perhaps much the same way that we control and shape the development of urban space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Next.